Ever since I first played Soul Silver as a kid, this one nameless NPC from Celadon City pops into my mind from time to time. He gives you either a TM for curse or a spell tag depending on whether you're playing the originals or the remakes, but only if you listen to his story at nighttime. I initially wasn't able to do that due to being a child with bedtimes and not quite willing to change my DS's clock, but one day I happened to be in a car with my next door neighbor / friend of the family who had his DS set to be at night at that given time. So he talked to this NPC and we heard a story about a bicycle being dragged down Cycling Road by some mysterious presence. This is naturally going to be creepy to child me, but as an adult it's funny to look back on how this is just a joke about how Cycling Road worked in the older games. It's such a random little moment to think back to as much as I do, and so insignificant that the mechanic it's referencing doesn't even exist in the remakes, but also so emblematic of the unique tone the Johto games have. Gold and Silver stick out amongst the many other Pokemon games for how much weird and off-color stuff you can stumble across. A big factor in this is the games now keeping track of both the time of day and the day of the week, which incentivizes events specific to a given day and such short time. The bug catching competition held only 3 days a week, Lapras showing up if you revisited an early game cave on a Friday. The day of the week siblings, who each give you a held item if you meet them in a specific area on a specific day of the week, and many more. I'm usually cynical towards that specific kind of wait a specific amount of real life time for an in-game resource design philosophy. Even ignoring cases like gachas and mobile city builders where the aim is to get you addicted so you can spend more money, it's in a similar vein to Cinnabon spreading the sense of its products around malls to me. Not necessarily doing material harm in of itself, but still a pretty transparent attempt to create that impulse of needing to turn on the game every day. But when it comes to the Johto game, stuff like go to this one post-game area on a Monday night and watch Clefairy dance to get an item you already had means of attaining is so weirdly specific that it's hard to get mad. These events are very much the natural response of the Mew under the truck style playground rumors of Gen 1, and Johto leaning into them as much as it does gives the region such a unique air of being rooted in tradition. Another thing that's always seemed odd about Gold and Silver is the way they go about their decks. Every single Kanto Pokemon is here, and the new additions to the roster are generally overshadowed by them. 4 Johto gym leaders and even the champion don't have any Johto Pokemon, which sticks out when there has only been a single gym leader since then who doesn't use anything from his respective gen. While this fact is often used against Gen 2, there's something so cool to me about how this is contextualized as everything after the original 151 being a new discovery. You can only do that when it's literally the second generation, and the roster leans into this sense of new discovery even beyond the obvious of baby Pokemon, evolutions of pre-existing Mons, and Mons with either of the brand new types. Dunsparce is based on the Tsuchinoko, and its low encounter rate further connects it to that kind of cryptid. Sudowoodo's entire shtick is hiding amongst trees and surprising people. Unknown is tied to an entire side activity involving archaeological research, complete with a music track that's become a staple in like creepy Pokemon Mysteries content. Shuckle and Sneasel are built up as rare / valuable for you first hearing about them due to the latter getting stolen. Said latter of those two and Mischievous have pretty clear yokai inspirations, the Kamaitachi and the Nukekube respectively. The legendary dogs came into being through a semi-recent miracle in comparison to the legendary birds who are always there. The farm animals Mareep and Miltank, the former even allegedly resulting from scrap plans to make a Pokemon based on Dolly the Clone Sheep, bring to mind the ever-changing nature of their real-life equivalents due to selective breeding techniques. Anytime you use a Moo Moo Milk item, just remember that a Miltank was bred precisely to feel pain if it's not creating it. That's one of the many design choices that make the first two gens feel closer to more traditional RPGs, namely Dragon Quest and Mother, than the brand identity ascribed to the series since. New monsters in Dragon Quest games, while something to look forward to, aren't treated with the same level of fanfare as Pokemon making them the primary selling point, so if a sizable number of monsters or bosses come from past games, it's not really that big of a deal. Other examples of those design choices in Gen 2 include the newfound non-linearity from attaining Surf just being how boats work in Dragon Quest, or how exploring the setting of prior games after beating the supposed final boss is similar to the DQ3 Dark World. Speaking of Kanto, have you ever stopped and thought about how the last 2 Kanto gym leaders, in addition to a Johto one, just don't have any puzzles or trainers or anything? It's something I've thought about weirdly often in a similar vein to the Cycling Road story on account of growing up with the remakes where Blaine and Blue are given more traditional gyms. And this is part of a broader pattern with Gold and Silver's approach to gym leaders. Nowadays, a gym leader's complete absence until you do something else is the norm, but Red and Blue's first 6 gym leaders were fairly straightforward, with the 2 main intrusions of the Cut Tree before Surge and Team Rocket taking over Saffron occurring independently to them. Then, the trek through an abandoned lab before Blaine and the 7 badge requirement for Giovanni are more so a natural ramping up of stakes by making you fight characters with greater significance, be it Blaine's role in the creation of Mewtwo or Giovanni's status as a crime boss. Interesting how Blaine and Giovanni's replacement just so happened to be the 2 Kanto leaders with no puzzles or trainers in Gen 2. What this whole spiel is getting at is that Gen 2 plays with the role of gym leader, and its holders of that title usually have something that's atypical to the grand image of the profession. Falconer, Janine, and Blue all recently got their gym from someone else, and the first two of those three are nepotism hires. Morty more so sees being a gym leader as a stepping stone to greater ambitions. Jasmine has to put her gym on hold for something more significant. Whitney and Claire both initially deny you their badges for petty reasons, with the former having a brief moment of childishness and the latter deliberately antagonizing you. Chuck lifts up its boulder and throws it so hard it breaks before realizing how that has nothing to do with a Pokemon battle, and this was completely omitted in the remakes. But another thing that's relevant to the gym leaders is how the game's level curve works. On the surface, it would seem like you'd have to grind to keep up with the 5th to 7th leaders disproportionately higher level than everything around them. And that might be true for the remakes, which are affected by Gen 4's power creep, but when it comes to the originals, there's a hidden factor at play. The Badge Boost, an obscure mechanic in the first 3 gens where the in-battle calculations involving any given stat for your mons are given a permanent multiplier corresponding to the badges you've earned. By the time you've got into the non-linear stretch of the game, you have the boost for attack and speed, and depending on the order you beat the leaders in, you can further close the gap with Jasmine's boost to defense and Price's boost to your special stats. In the early gens, where enemy move pools aren't as well defined and no physical special split limits team building, this leads to situations where, even if it might seem like your opponent is at a significant advantage, beating them is easier than you think. This is most pronounced in Gen 2 due to what its infamous level curve looks like on the surface. Gen 2's version of Team Rocket is a similar attempt at playing with what Gen 1 established. They're no longer the well-organized crime syndicate of the first 2 games, and now exist as a loosely defined group with no clue what they're doing after Giovanni's disappearance. Likewise, the shift from Gen 1's rival to Gen 2's rival goes from someone who's an ass in the more playful ways that an ordinary kid would be to an active juvenile delinquent. And with all this talk of Gen 2 subverting expectations, it's time to discuss what Gold and Silver do with the most iconic trainer in the entire series, and the biggest challenge you'll ever face on your Johto journey: Fire Breather Dick. Fire Breather Dick is a trainer in Burn Tower who uses a Charmeleon, an important status symbol due to the rarity of starter Pokemon. This Charmeleon is so powerful that all your Pokemon instantly faint from fear, but if you hack the game so you can win, he will say, "I burn down to white ashes," and completely change his sprite upon being defeated. This is a reference to the boxing manga Ashita no Joe, where protagonist Joe Yabuki's self-destructive desire to put his all into boxing no matter the cost is described as a fire burning so intensely that it's eventually reduced to nothing but white ashes. Ashita no Joe is a highly influential series, so these kinds of nods to it are common to see in any Japanese form of entertainment, but something about the fact that the programmers went out of their way to change his sprite makes it so funny to me. Unfortunately, Fire Breather Dick was completely removed from Crystal, and drastically altered to Fire Breather Richard in the remakes, and I've been mailing dead rats to Game Freak ever since. But okay, fine, we can talk about some completely irrelevant loser too. For as much as a mythologized figure Red is in Pokemon discussions due to his mechanical role as a super boss, his big accomplishment of becoming the champion really isn't that notable in the context of the game's world. His mom isn't talking about his achievements, but rather wondering if he's okay, and out of the 8 Kanto gym leaders, the only one he left enough of an impact on for them to mention him was the one he knew before his journey. If anything, causing Team Rocket to disband is the accomplishment that NPCs give more attention to, and even then he's usually referred to with insignificant terms like "some kid." In a mechanical context, Red is a pronounced example of the badge boost at work. While his mons are in their late 70s, it's fairly common for a player's mons to be in the 50s to 60s range upon defeating him. The supposed strongest trainer ever is more often than not going to be defeated by someone who's significantly weaker than him, whereas the 2 main figures he claimed the title of champion from got tangible careers from it. Despite all that, though, the battle between Gold/Chris and Red still undeniably feels mythical. The former champion who disappeared to further hone his skills, and the new holder of the title who tore their way through 2 regions to get to where they are, facing each other on top of a stand-in for Mount Fuji, just sounds like a Musashi vs. Kojiro-esque legend. Red's status as the supposed greatest trainer might not hold any weight in terms of official titles like Gym Leader or Champion, but it did mean enough for Gold/Chris, and moreover you, the player, to actively seek him out. The first 2 Pokemon generations are games marked by the value we ascribe to things as children. Gen 1 largely evokes the experience of going out and exploring as a child. Being awestruck by both the adults you look up to and natural phenomena far greater than us as a species, and at the same time feeling terror from both less trustworthy adults and the potential danger of the side of nature we can't explain. Gen 2 being set 3 years after Red's travels causes it to now evoke the feeling of not quite being done with adolescence just yet, but growing up just enough that the cracks in your simplistic image of the world start to show. With the less idealized image of gym leader as a profession, the adults you aspire to be like aren't quite as bulletproof as you once thought they were. With the less organized structure that Team Rocket takes on, the shadowy boogeymen you were told to look out for have lost their mystique. And the volcanic eruption on Cinnabar Island shows nature's real potential to do harm, while the restructuring of Lavender Town shows the unexplainable unimaginable being tamed. But even within the more cynical tone of Gold and Silver, the sense of childlike wonder that Gen 1 exists to convey still persists. The addition of time of day in the context of simplistic 8-bit graphics results in the changes in lighting being at their most blunt and causes the beauty of nature to shine through whether it's morning, day, or night. The more advanced music compositions than those of Gen 1 further add to this, conjuring up sublime images of nature. Johto's association with tradition, as exemplified by its most identifiable symbol of the Twin Towers taking inspiration from a pair of Zen Buddhist temples, gives it a warmer feeling than the harsher industrial aesthetic of Kanto. And Silver's character arc from a juvenile delinquent to someone who can genuinely forge friendships with Pokemon is him finding value in childlike idealism in spite of everything that would encourage him to give in to the brand of cynicism that's perceived as more adult. Gen 2 is the weirdest Pokemon generation to me because it's this transitional point from the risky passion project of Gen 1 to the massive multimedia empire that Pokemon as a brand would become. Existing as an initial expansion in scope, but still feeling reminiscent of the series' humble origins of a child's insect collecting hobby in ways you can't say for most of what came after it. And because of that, they end up representing the transitional point from the optimistic outlook of a child to the more realist mindset of an adult, and the merit this former still has.